Few parents anywhere, albeit conscientious, caring parents, would react enthusiastically to the following news from their college freshmen returning home at winter break. Mom, Dad, I've decided to major in art history. It's funny. Why is it funny? Isn't art not our most enduring form and consistent form of communication? Every documented culture has had some form of visual art. And today, of course, images are the primary vehicle of our public discourse as we generate and share more pictures daily than at any point in human history. Shouldn't we be more intent on organizing our thinking around them? Yet today, few college students are required to take a single course in the contemplation and study of the visual arts. Perhaps the time has come to reassess the value of disenfranchised fields of learning like art history. What if we were to take a minute as stakeholders in student success and to reaffirm the project of undergraduate education, to refine the ever-narrowing path that aligns college major and career training? Of course, they say, why go to college if not to get on the path to success? Okay, but the soaring cost of college and the inability of recent graduates to earn enough to even locate the on-ramp to their future should suggest that this process needs some fresh thinking. So I am here to frustrate what we believe about the purpose of undergraduate education. We are undeniably at a historical inflection point, the dawn of artificial intelligence. We are told constantly about how entire fields of learning will be transformed, worlds of work decisively disrupted. What is it that's going to be on the other side? Students coming into this atmosphere are going to be able to make a contribution not based on previous forms of knowledge, but what they can do going forward. Surprisingly, many business leaders, in fact, started in the humanities. And if we follow through on my thought experiment and try to consider the idea that perhaps students can spend their time at college not simply training for a career, but in fact learning to live more successfully and more intentionally as human beings. Some of these folks might be an example in the way that they were able to learn to be great communicators, to be effective leaders because they can refine and recalibrate their thinking on the fly as they work with others. It's interesting today that we take every opportunity to use art history as a punchline, and when we can't find art history, we use folklore or French poetry. The idea being that these majors are in fact useless. And yet still, we celebrate in the stories that we tell heroes that enjoy these finer things. I'm thinking of the overachiever Tony Stark paradigm, the perfect protagonist, expert level and knowledge in engineering, math, what have you, but also conversant in fine art and culture. Always fine paintings on the wall, always tuxedoed at the opera, right? To begin, I'd like to offer 3 disclaimers. First, I'd like to set aside any potential social impact that this technological shift might cause. I'm going to leave that to sociologists like Sherry Turkle at MIT, who has explored the dangers of fractioned attention spans and the idea that this could have some kind of social impact on students' development. Second, while I am sympathetic to the countless appeals in the past to the value of the humanities by brilliant thinkers like Martha Nussbaum, who claims that the study of the liberal arts makes us better citizens, I am not making this sort of moral argument. And finally, I listened to my parents and I got a practical degree in finance from here, Villanova University. But I did go on at the graduate level to earn a master's and a PhD in art history. And I promise you, I am not here in a self-serving interest to appeal to more art history majors. Unless anyone wants to, I'll see you in the lobby. I've been thinking of this quote. This quote by Oscar Wilde, that all art is quite useless. It succinctly highlights the inverse relationship between the function of a work of visual culture and its value as fine art. To put it another way, contrasting something that is practical like craft art and something that is purely aesthetic. This seems to resonate very nicely with the idea that art history is a useless major when measured by the metric of job prospects. I am not here, nor would I ever think of trying to counter this, but to celebrate it. Hooray for art history! A major, impractical as it may be, going forward can provide us foundational skills that can help shape careful and critical thinkers. On my way to building a case for art history, I propose that in the spirit of futurist thinker Kevin Kelly, that we meet the challenge of advancing technology by greeting it as an opportunity to reflect on what's in front of us. To quote Kelly, when answers become cheap, good questions become more difficult and therefore more valuable. It's the humanities that can help us to frame and ask better questions. However, when it comes to answers, one of the principal challenges of generative AI is it may lead some to confuse information and knowledge. If we can train software to recognize and analyze images, the resulting output is a mere summary of pre-existing reactions and responses that others have left behind. The idea of building knowledge suggests that we bring something to this equation. In the spirit of Kevin Kelly, looking forward, we want to find a way, through the arts perhaps, through the humanities perhaps, to engage in this conversation. What all this has to do with art is the difference between looking and seeing. We can quickly amass vast troves of data regarding Pablo Picasso's famous painting Guernica, about what it possibly means, its importance in history, and other measurable data. But the software tools cannot experience the painting. In other words, they can't see it. Jennifer Roberts, art historian, drives this distinction. She says, just because you look at something doesn't mean that you have seen it. Looking is about perception. It's sensory. But to see is to make sense. If art is not your thing, or if you haven't spent much time thinking about it, it's entirely understandable that an abstract work like this one, by contemporary Chinese artist Saiguo Qiang, might raise emotions. It might make you feel uncertain or even uncomfortable. In our fast-paced world today, driven to distraction as we are by technology, we have so few moments for reflection, particularly for works of art that, on first blush, challenge us. It's my hope that we can persist through this initial discomfort, to find a way to persist and to understand. In fact, I've made it my life's work. When we encounter objects in museums, too often we look, but we don't really see. Works of art are a type of persistent event. They're timeless, but they're there in front of us, demanding fresh perspectives and continuous scrutiny. But too often we amble by like tourists, moving on and away from the possibility of a deeper experience. With the training that we have in art history, through discussion and asking good questions, it's my hope that we can imagine these works as possibly carrying the force of the exchange of that original artist creator, and cultural receiver. The heart of this struggle surrounds the nature of images themselves. They're not self-evident. They're situationally contextualized. To offer a practical example, let's contemplate a photograph of my brother. AI can be trained to recognize images. But beyond mere recognition, it's the human interaction with the photograph that provides the context for meaning and understanding. Cherished photos, like works of art, are not data points. They come alive with memory and meaning. They resonate. They inspire us. They move us. On the topic of images and meaning, in his 1984 book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, media critic Neil Postman claimed that despite the growing popularity of images in our public discourse, that they're inefficient ways of knowing the world, particularly when taken at face value. An image of my brother only makes sense when I supply the context. We can look at it, we can enjoy it, but what we can know about that boy is there on the surface of the photo, a reflection of our own relative experience of the object. It doesn't tell us about brotherhood, it doesn't tell us about friendship. It just keeps saying the same message over again. When we forego the study of art history, we are likely to linger at this primary way of knowing, giving up the possibility of a more significant experience. Just to drive the point home, that's not my brother. So why art history? Why take art in the dark? What's it good for exactly? Well, art history is the careful evaluation of works of art to connect us as human beings, past and present, globally and locally. That has few parallels in the history of images or the history of culture more generally. We study human creativity to figure out what we value in the past and how we make meaning in the present. Along those lines, of late, we've moved beyond simply repetition or presentation of cultural knowledge, asking new questions to push beyond the West, to look to a global environment, to shatter known certainties, and to try out future discourses. At the viewer level, this provides the opportunity for parties who have not been invited formally to the conversation to level the playing field. It makes me think of the work of Professor Padilla-Peralta at Princeton, who asks us to rethink the whole field of the classics. In essence, to ask better questions. After all, beyond the classroom, art can actually be a significant trigger for what psychologists call peak human experiences. A sense of awe can ensue when we can get aside from our everyday and just be in the moment. Like going to view the Grand Canyon, art can expand our ideas of ourselves. Art can make us forget in the moment, to move beyond our rational, planning, reactive minds. Like poetry, drama, literature, dance, works of visual art can help us to connect to others even at a spiritual level. Let's face it, we could all benefit from some more time for culture. Less scrolling, more strolling. Honestly, around the water cooler, people come alive when they talk about their trip to Paris, when they talk about what happened there. Has anyone ever regretted going to the Louvre? Except maybe for the crowds. In the end, when we slow down to consider the past, it helps us to live more fully in the present. With a little bit of effort, we can come to see the thread of the human story that pulls through the objects that we leave behind. Today, more than ever, on this edge of this great technological shift, the time has come to rethink majors like art history as one of many discounted realms of human knowledge that can help us to persist in the fast-changing world ahead. If we can take a moment today to reflect, then we can put students on a pathway to help us all tomorrow. So I say, let's smile and say yes to our freshman who wants to change their major. And please say it with me. Hooray for art history. Thank you.